AI. So a lot of people love AI, others hate AI. Some are on the fence about it, but most don't know how to talk about it.
You're being so much like your father.
You're exactly like your mother.
So in this video, we're gonna talk about 10 reasons why you should not use AI. Let's go. Now, I'm a Christian, and so all of my reasons that I'm gonna give are gonna be summed up in a human being's relationship to God and a human being's relationship to other human beings. But if you're not a Christian, you might think, why am I listening to a Christian interpretation of this?
I don't need to listen to this.
But Christians want a seat at the table too. And so the principles that develop as the reasons stack up start to threaten the ways in which that we relate to our God and the ways in which we relate to others. So reason number one that you should stay away from AI is that you ought to not have any other gods before God. Yes, so if you haven't caught on yet, I am walking through the 10 commandments as the 10 reasons why we should not use AI. What? So haha, clickbait, but hopefully it's a good kind of clickbait. And the comparisons of AI with God is becoming very scary.
You can just, similar, since ChatGPT, this revolution with Gen AI, and you can just speak your ideas into existence. I mean, this starts, sounding religious. Like this is like the gods, the myths that humans have created. They used to imagine a world where you can be everywhere and anywhere at once. That's sort of the internet, and you can also speak your ideas into existence.
The word God was used a few times.
Probably for the purposes of this conversation, it would be best to think of me as a complex systems theorist. One of the things that I believe is true about AI is that this is the first time that we have built machines that have crossed the threshold from the highly complicated into the truly complex. And I don't know quite how to balance a discussion about all of the things that can clearly come from this that are utterly transcendent. I mean, I do think it is not inappropriate to be invoking God or biblical metaphors here. You're producing water seemingly from thin air. I believe that does have an exact biblical parallel.
The reason I actually went to the 10 Commandments is because it is natural law. So that when God created us, He created us in His image, and His natural and moral law is stamped on our consciences. And the 10 Commandments are a summary of that natural and moral law. And anytime we're trying to figure out what it means to be a human being and live in God's world in obedience to Him with order and structure and meaning, we have to look to the 10 Commandments.
This is a lot to take in right now.
So a summary of the first reasons that I have are outsourcing our faith. And you can break apart the outsourcement of our faith when you consider faith in terms of personal and private worship. And the first commandment is a call to worship the triune God alone. And many throughout church history have applied the first commandment to human hearts by drawing their attention to the importance of depending upon God alone. And when we're depending on AI to give us information and knowledge, and it takes on like this imitation of omniscience, this starts to feel divine. You can idolize your job, you can idolize your spouse or your children or your status. So also, here's a technological advancement and we are depending upon it. So like you get a text message and it rubs you the wrong way and you don't want to disrupt this relationship, so you want to figure out how's the best way to respond. So you look to AI for wisdom.
You got me.
I know people who previously were very coarse, and then suddenly they started putting what they're saying through ChatGPT in order to kind of make it kinder and nicer, and they're more liked now. And so not only is it making us more intelligent, but also it allows us to be the best version of ourselves.
How much are you depending? And that's a question you have to ask yourself. How much are you depending on AI for wisdom? You don't want to outsource the process, the journey. Some call it a pilgrim's progress, and being okay with the uncomfortable aspects of that experience. So the first commandment calls our hearts out to worship and depend upon God alone. In the second commandment, we can only worship God the way that He's commanded. We don't rely on inventions of man to worship Him, but you must do it with sincerity in communities of faith on God's appointed day. Commandment number 4. The other 6 of the 10 commandments have to do with our love to neighbor, but it cannot be overstated just how deeply related our love to God and our love to neighbor really are. This is seen very clearly in the third commandment and its emphasis on sincerity.
I asked ChatGPT, please compose a 30-second prayer to God in the spirit and theology of Don Carson. May our lives, redeemed and sanctified by your Spirit, be vessels of praise to the riches of your grace. To you be glory forever and ever. Amen. That's a machine. As I'm asking, is that praise? No! Words? Computers do words better than you. The universe exists to have people in God's image who feel the worth of grace.
We don't want a copy of sincerity. We want real sincerity. Artificial intelligence, fake intelligence, imitation intelligence. John Bunyan said that there is no other kind of prayer than a sincere prayer. And when you're dealing with prayer at a private and public level, you can extrapolate that out to a religious community and say these communities need to be sincere communities. Our private lives and our looking for wisdom needs to be sincere. Our prayers need to be sincere, and that's hard. Some might say that AI only poses threats to human relationships, but no serious threat to our relation to God. But this exposes how bifurcated the unity between our love for God and our love for neighbor has become. At the very least, artificial intelligence places human beings, and Christians among them, in a world that is increasingly fake.
Fake? Who said this was fake?
Christians, especially evangelicals, and especially Baptists, with their emphasis on sincerity of profession, must be a witness to the importance of sincerity in a world that feels more plastic each day. And at the very least, AI's impact on the importance of sincerity in our relation to others made in God's image can infect the importance of sincerity between ourselves and God. And then you look at the other 6 commandments, and if you're still watching and haven't clicked off already, you might be thinking, I ain't sitting through the next 6 commandments.
I can't deal with this.
Well, hold on. I'm not going to walk through each of them, and we'll just pivot by talking about calling and vocation. So you are God's. You live in His world, and you obey His commandments, and He has called you in this world to stations in life. And some of those stations are stations that could be considered superiority, and others are inferiority. So you have, for example, a parent is a superior over a child, and a child is an inferior. Now the parent has duties to that child, and the child has duties to the parent. You could do this with governing officials, teachers, employers. Everyone in this life has been called to serve both God and neighbor.
I'm just here to serve.
And so you can't kill the image of God. You can't cheat against the image of God. You can't lie to the image of God. You can't steal from the image of God. You can't even covet what another made in the image of God has, which would be the first step in breaking into the other commandments. You look at the second table of the law and say these are natural and moral guidelines and wisdom from heaven that helps me know how I, as a teacher or a pastor or a governing official or a videographer or a parent, can love God. So imagine an evening you come home from work and you have a robot now, a robot with AI, and the first thing you need to cut the grass, but you get a robot to do that. I just outsource my humanity, outsource part of my calling. Or I need to feed the dogs, get the robot to do that. Well, it starts to get closer and closer to our faith and raising children, especially for parents, when it's like, okay, well now I need to put the kids to bed. We'll get the robot to do that. Well, does the robot read a bedtime story? Does the robot teach the child anything? Does the robot pray? Can the robot pray? What if it's your habit to pray with your child before they go to bed? Well, are you outsourcing our humanity more and more and more in our calling and our station and our work? And you know, when it's someone's birthday and you go to AI to tell you the nice things that you should say to that person on their birthday, you just outsource part of your calling. And the more and more we do this, the more we're like a frog in the boiling pot, just like adapting to life around us. And more, we're not breaking the other 6 commandments, but we're outsourcing our duty to them. Time for a brief excursus on learning. I have actually an 11th reason. The principle of comprehensive reading, like that's real reading, right? You got real prayer and you got real reading.
I can read.
What real comprehensive reading is understanding an argument that someone's making in light of the rest of your system and in light of other things that you've read. Actually being able to, you grow that skill the more quickly you're able to compare and contrast what that person is saying with themselves, with yourself, and with other things that you've read. AI can outsource this process for you to where you don't have to exercise that skill any longer, or less and less. In other words, you're actually getting dumber. And our children are in a really tricky place when it comes to, how do we raise our kids? At the very least, if you teach them how to use AI, you still have to teach them how to think for themselves as well. So then there's the question of, when do we get off this train? So Brett Weinstein said,
when Heather and I wrote our book, I wanted the first chapter to be, are the Amish right? And the answer is, they can't be exactly right because they picked an arbitrary moment to step off the escalator. But are they right that there's something dangerous about this continuing pattern of technological change? Clearly they are. Basically, they voluntarily accept they're basically a Luddite community, and they have turned out to fare surprisingly well against many of the things that have upended modern
COVID,
folks.
one of them, right?
I'm not arguing that we should live like the Amish. I don't see that. But I do think the idea that they had an insight, which was you need to step off that escalator because you're just going to keep making yourselves sicker, is probably right.
So it's not a matter of if we should get off the train, it's a matter of when we get off the train. And the Amish choose to get off the train at this point because we could say that there comes a point in time when we've outsourced our humanity to death. Now, to prepare for this video, I reread Brave New World. But then as I was nearing the end, I became curious whether or not anyone had, at a scholarly level, mapped the Brave New World conversation onto AI and said, we're seeing Huxley's predictions actually come true. AI algorithms in recruitment software can predetermine an individual's career trajectory, eerily reminiscent of Huxley's categorization of individuals into alphas or epsilons. Similarly, AI and social media algorithms influence our perceptions and interactions, subtly conditioning our responses in a manner that Huxley might have foreseen. There's some other quotes from this essay that I found helpful. I'm not necessarily recommending it, but I will link it in the description below. I think it's a stimulating thought exercise to consider whether or not AI has given us actually the brave new world. I think it has, but you might disagree. That Neil Postman gave an address regarding the questions that we should ask ourselves before we adopt a technological innovation.
What is the problem to which a technology claims to be the solution? Whose problem is it? What new problems will be created because of solving an old one? Which people and institutions will be most harmed? What changes in language are being promoted? What shifts in economic and political power are likely to result? And finally, what alternative media might be made from a technology?
Most people aren't asking themselves these questions before they go to use AI. Their first thought is productivity, but their second thought might be ethics. But I don't hear anyone saying we're outsourcing the hard work and we're outsourcing our callings. It's trickier, but what we are doing is we're so outsourcing ourselves to the point that will the world need us or not? So you do have, correctly, Bernie Sanders worrying about meaning and purpose in life.
How do you, if all you're doing is just getting a check and you can just stay at home and stare at the TV and the money keeps coming and then you eat processed food all day, what is life?
What happens later when even more work is eliminated and what the purpose of human life becomes, that is a very profound question.
That's the question. What do you think happens?
It's hard to imagine, because it's so that we are going to have to find different meaning in life. We have to find it in ourselves in ways that you don't know and I don't know because we're not there yet. We're not living 50 years from now.
I don't even think it's 50.
And on this note, I'm just going to mention some struggle that I've had about, does liberal theology or liberalism or liberal ideology come first in the course of history, or does technology come first? Or does technology influence our social imaginary to the point that we develop certain bad ideas? Or do the bad ideas result in the bad technology? And I think, I'm just thinking out loud right here. I'm just thinking in the cloud.
No, I'm just thinking.
I wonder if it's actually the ideological pool that we all swim in disables us from asking Neil Postman's or Neil Postman-like kind of questions before we adopt the technological advances. The bad ideology that we have swam in the 20th and 21st centuries has allowed us to make certain technological advancements that put us in a godlike status more and more and more. We feel in control over nature.
It is a gift.
Willem Dafoe had some things to say about that.
We have not become so much enlightened as we have been blinded by the gaseous light of science.
So in Brave New World, there's a line, Providence takes its cues from men.
Providence.
I wonder if ideologically we're more willing to adopt those things because the culture that we swim in is because God's not going to do it. We look at a technological advancement and say, no, we're not going to do that. But the retort is, but look at the good it's going to do for humanity. But you could retort back and say, there's only so much responsibility that we can take for healing all of mankind. Our moral obligation is first and foremost to our faith and our communities and our people. So yeah, if you think God is dead, or if you've adopted the cultural milieu in which you swim in, and there's a technological advancement, but then someone looks at you and says, what purpose does this serve? You could respond, if you're ideologically captured, with, what is purpose? I'm glad you said that. The very fact that we even are asking the question, should we even do this, shows that we have a conscience that God made, and He is our judge who will hold us accountable, and we will be held accountable. Everyone can agree that at some point, we'll outsource our humanity so much that we won't be needed.
Human beings are a disease.
What is the Christian response to that? And I'm leaning toward more and more discomfort with a wholesale adoption of AI in Christian communities with little to no conversation about whether or not we should use them. But my journey has been first ambivalence, then fascination, and I've used AI quite a bit. Now I've pulled back a little bit, in part because of that learning aspect. I don't know if this is going to be a very widespread movement of people putting down their foot. I'm a YouTuber, so I can only put my foot down in some ways, but we do rely on AI technologies already as YouTubers and people who do business online. But I don't think it's wrong to go into the cloud and voice concerns. I don't think that's wrong either, because this is the context that we're in. I do think that there will be a growing restlessness that will echo John the Savage's conclusions at the end of his monologue with the controller. John the Savage says, "But I like the inconveniences." "We don't," said the controller. "We prefer to do things comfortably." "But I don't want comfort. I want God. I want poetry. I want real danger. I want freedom. I want goodness. I want sin." So there is going to be a growing number of people, I believe, that will, because of these reasons, look at AI and say, I don't want to outsource the sense of risk and pain that comes with the reward at the end of the tunnel. I don't want just the reward. I want the pain.
You're entering a world of pain.
It's part of the human experience, and as Christians we say it's part of the human experience in a fallen world where our federal head broke God's commandment and breached the covenant of works, and now all are born into a world of sin and sadness. And we look to God and His promises to give us comfort, wisdom, light, walking in this dark world. AI comes into our lives and it says, I can make all this pain go away. I can make living in a sinful and sad world go away.
It is a gift.
And you don't have to worry about this frustrated relationship between sin and God. But I think that more and more people are going to say, I want God. I want sin. Meaning I want the struggle of good and evil, and I want to be part of that process, and I want to enter into the program's progress. I'm going to say you can use AI. You just can't sin. Hopefully these 10 reasons you shouldn't use AI will give you better wisdom to know how and when you ought to use it if you so choose to do so. It's like we already depend on this AI so much. That was what I was getting at when I said maybe we're already the frogs in the boiling pot, and I don't know what escaping this would actually look like. So what I'm doing is framing a restlessness that maps onto John the Savage's restlessness and just voice that. And so I know that I'm not taking a hard stance, and I'm not spearheading a movement and saying, oh, we're all going to go live off the grid. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to pretend like I even have the ability to do something like that, but I can say, keep wanting God and stay Baptist, my friends. Thanks, Drewa Hansine, for joining our Patreon. It's great to have you aboard.
You have to be scared. Stop running, it's gonna be blurry. It's pretty still.